Good morning, everybody. My name is Barry Schwartz, and this is the Search Buzz video recap. Today is Friday, October 23rd, and this is the search news we cover over the week at the Search Engine Roundtable, seroundtable.com. A lot to discuss. First, we got Google passage indexing, or is it ranking? What's the current status on indexing issues? Where is that next Google Core update? And the Department of Justice sued Google over alleged monopolistic practices. So stay tuned. Also this week, proud to say that we have a sponsor. As you can see over here behind me, it's Loud Interactive, the Chicago-based SEO firm led by Brent D. Payne. So thank you so much for sponsoring. And if you're interested in sponsoring, just hit me up. Okay, so the big news last week, but going into this week is around passage indexing. Google announced a week ago at the Search On 2020 event, which we covered last week in the video, that Google launched something called passage indexing. It is passage ranking. It's not passage indexing. Google is not indexing anything differently than it did before, like we discussed. And we discussed this in detail, basically, that Google used the word indexing. It's really a ranking change. Google has not changed at all how they do indexing. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't matter per se for searchers, but in terms of how SEOs need to think about how Google accesses and crawls your website and indexes your site, there is no change happening. This is not live yet. As we discussed, it's not going live until maybe November or maybe the end of this year. And it will have a 7% impact on the Google search results. So it's going to be pretty big. I mean, bigger than Penguin, smaller than Panda on first launch, but it's going to be pretty big. Now, it's not really targeted towards SEOs. It's more like a BERT change in terms of probably you won't notice that much, but we'll see how much of an impact it will have. And if you see anybody doing studies on it now, saying, patches SEO and patches this, it's not true. There's lots of myths out there, which Danny Sullivan went ahead and discussed. There's even after Google, I got Google to basically publicly on their channel, the Search Liaison account, tweet that it's about ranking, not indexing, because there were some people in the industry that wanted an official post by Google, and they didn't trust that I spoke to a Google spokesperson about it. So they went ahead and did a whole series of tweets on it, including talking about it's not indexing, it's ranking. But then some people didn't even believe Google. So Danny Sullivan had to go ahead and tweet and say, no, it is not about indexing, it's about ranking. And he said, we are not indexing passages, period. And he went and explained the 7. He basically summed up what they announced, which we just discussed. It won't be live until the end of this year, but Google will go ahead and tweet out when it goes live. In addition, basically, if you see anybody trying to sell you passage SEO, ignore it. It's not a real thing. You can't really optimize it. The question is, can you optimize for it or not? Is Google telling the truth? You couldn't optimize for core updates. You couldn't do anything about core updates. And then Google said, here's a list of things you can do for core updates. We will see. I kind of think that you might be able to do something around passage indexing, because if Google's going to be pulling out and zooming into content that's longer and then zooming into a snippet of that content, a passage of that content, it will be interesting to see if you kind of optimize passages more with maybe headers or something like that. So we will see, and I'm sure SEOs will test it. And then Danny Sullivan went and tweeted about what's the difference between passage indexing versus feature snippets. And Google actually gave me an answer on that earlier on. He basically Google says systems determine that the relevancy of any web document via understanding passages. Feature snippets, on the other hand, identify the most relevant passages in a document we've overall determined to be relevant to the query. So it's kind of slightly different. But then Danny Sullivan tweeted that feature snippets are more used for voice search. Passage indexing probably won't. Also, it's a totally different system. Google's not using the same system for feature snippets that it uses for passage indexing. So keep that in mind. All right, let's go on to indexing. So as you know, last week, Google suspended temporarily the request indexing tool in Google Search Console. And the big question is, when will it return? And Google's not being 100% clear. Google said upcoming weeks or so. John Mueller said in upcoming weeks. I doubt I'll be back next week. A lot of SEOs, there was a poll done by Tom Rayner asking when it will come back, and almost 60% of SEOs think it will never come back. I don't think that to be true. I think it'll be back in about a month, definitely by the year end. I'd be shocked if it didn't come back by then. I think it's something to do with all these indexing issues and Google trying to slow the queue of things getting into the index, at least by SEOs kind of pushing towards it. And Google on indexing issues gave a final status update this week. Google announced that as of October 14th, a week ago Wednesday, it was 99% resolved. And as of this video, by the time you're watching it, it actually should be 100% resolved. Google said final update, canonical issues was effectively resolved last Wednesday with about 99% of URLs restored. We expect the remaining edge cases, I guess the 1%, will be restored within a week or two. So by now, I would suspect that issue to be resolved, if not by next week, probably. This started up big time, so around September 22nd, September 23rd, but the issues happened earlier than that. But if you notice any weirdness between September 22nd and October 14th, you could probably relate it to that. SEOs are patiently waiting, still waiting for the Google Core update. It's been almost 6 months, which is pretty unheard of for Google Core updates. Usually Google does that every 3 to 4 months. And now it's been almost 6 months, and I'm not sure when it's going to come out. So we are waiting for it. Technically, Google said you can recover on some level from core updates without a next core update. But the big recoveries really require another core update from what I've seen. So patiently wait, and you will see. Sunrise is happening, I think, behind me right now. So take that in, beautiful sight. All right, you got it? Good. Let's move on. Google seems to be more comfortable discussing EAT around health-related queries. Remember when I announced, or I kind of named one of the updates, the medic update, and not everybody, there was a number of people in the community and at Google pretty upset with the name? I guess it kind of turns out to be right, because now Google is very, very okay with talking about how EAT, expertise, trustworthiness, and authoritativeness, I didn't spell it as EAT, but whatever, is very, very related to specifically health-related queries, your money, your life types of queries, and those are more and more important. So it's very interesting to see Google more openly talk about it. And in the video recently, I think on October 2nd, John Mueller talked about it. In more videos Google are talking about it. In fact, in executive talks, on announcements, Google is very proud to talk about their efforts on making sure that the queries around health and medical related queries are much more strict and conservative, making sure the site has EAT types of factors, whatever you want to call it, there. Google said that slow URLs technically can potentially impact the rest of URLs. So the way Google actually discovers these URLs is that they use obviously Chrome data, Crux data, and so forth to figure out what the speed of specific URLs are. Now, if Google doesn't have enough data for all your URLs on the site, it will assume the data from the URLs that it actually has data for. So if the home page and your 5 top category pages has data on because it has the most traffic from Chrome users, it's going to assume the other pages have a similar speed than those pages that it has indexed for. So although Google tries to be granular with their speed metrics and all their metrics in general, it has to assume if it doesn't have certain signals about certain URLs, it will get those signals from other URLs that it has signals from. And that's really how it works across most signals that Google uses, including the speed signals. Google said that links in commented out HTML, when you use the HTML exclamation point, etc., brackets to go ahead and say, here's a comment about something that I programmed in this HTML. Links in there are not used for ranking purposes. They can be discovered by Google, but they're not used for ranking purposes. Google released another Search Off the Record podcast. They talked about a lot of things. It was very entertaining. I love that podcast. Talked about rendering, indexing, SEO, and developer relationships, conference stuff. And they even said that they've seen people try to do Bitcoin mining using Google Search's rendering capabilities, and it doesn't work. So don't bother with that. Gary said from Google that Google has a stupid high limit around how many links it can index and extract from a single page. So it's more than 100. It's probably more than 1,000. Is it more than 20,000? I don't know. I don't know what that limit is, but they do have a limit. Previously, Google said don't worry about it. And I guess most sites do not have to worry about it. Google said the first index page doesn't always mean, so if Google indexes a page A, scraper site A, scraper page A, before it indexes and crawls the original source, it doesn't mean that Google's going to say just because it indexed the scraper site first that it's going to rank the scraper site first. Most SEOs don't believe that. So Google still supports the data vocabulary structured data format. It was supposed to go out, I think, last April, then they pushed it off to June because of COVID, and it's still somewhat supported. It's unofficially supported. If you're still using it, it actually will work. But do not, if you're using it, definitely switch over to Schema or other formats. Well, Schema is probably what you should probably go with, but it's still supported as of right now. Google Search Console is sending notifications for Google Discover optimization tips. So they're asking you specifically to use a special meta tag to send Google a higher resolution image for that Discover graphic so that it could use that in Google search. Specifically, the meta tag max image preview large. So it could use that within Google search, in Google Discover. Google Maps and Local are finally showing the health and safety tab and information in the About Us tab, where it's showing you health and safety tips around enhanced cleaning, personal protection, physical distancing at the business, minimize contact, and increase food safety. This was spotted this week as well as a week ago, so I guess it's starting to roll out to more and more places. This is interesting. So Google's testing this more info button. You've seen it before with the 3 dots on a specific snippet. You click on it and it gives you more information about that snippet, be it an ad or a organic listing. And that's something that Google's testing. But Google's testing it, and what they have in that information is very interesting. You'll see a screenshot. It basically shows you the site age. Is the site secure? What the URL is it an ad or a paid listing or not? It's very interesting that Google will actually show that in the organic results. I don't see it live, but it's definitely being tested. Google Ads launched a slew of new features around shopping, around price-conscious shoppers, especially now in the economic times we have right now. They basically tell you if a product in a Google ad is a good deal. You could track and get alerts when the price changes. You could go ahead and compare more and more sites in different ways. Google also launched a promotions highlighting feature where you can show the sale price annotation as well as the promotion annotation and more deeper insights. So definitely take a look at that if you are selling on Google Ads or Google Merchant Center. Speaking about Google Ads, it is their 20th birthday today. They launched 20 years ago today as AdWords. So congratulations and happy birthday to Google Ads. Google AdSense launched Vignette ads, and it's on wider screens. It's been around for a while, but now they're saying they're supporting it on wider screens, and then the results are very promising. So if you have wider screens and you want to use those, definitely do that. And finally, big news this week, after 20 years of launching Google AdWords, now they're being sued by the Department of Justice over alleged monopolistic and anti-competitive practices. I don't know, this is probably the strongest and most serious lawsuit they'll ever face. They'll try to break up the company as whatever way they can. Will anything happen? I suspect so. I'm not sure what. We'll have to see what happens. It's going to be long and dragged out, and we'll just keep an eye on it and track it. It's definitely a serious lawsuit, and I guess we'll just see what happens over the time. In any event, thank you so much for listening to the Search Buzz video recap. My name again is Barry Schwartz. Thanks to our sponsor Loud, and everyone have a great weekend. Again, today is Friday, October 23rd. Everyone have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys next. Goodbye.